So I think that's the reason why RPA and UNDP have invited Wings to take on the role of co-leadership on the philanthropy side of the platform. For those who are not yet familiar with us, Wings is a global network of philanthropy support organizations. We have 140 members who across the world are supporting the field. So the idea is to see how we can leverage that unique potential, that unique network, and its indirect outreach to about 100,000 philanthropic entities to better contribute to allow our sector to better contribute to the SDGs. And so the question that will, for us, as we're now starting designing this new phase and thinking about what we could do as a next phase, the question that will lead us here is not only about how can we coordinate philanthropic resources with UN resources, government resources, business resources, especially focusing on like the major international grant makers. But the question is really how can we unlock the potential for giving and philanthropy at all levels of society and everywhere, including in the global south, including in emerging economies. That's why also we're glad to have that title for the event today. And so the way that we hope and we think we can do it, and I think it resonates very much with what you were proposing, Marcos, is like there are 4 points, and I will then stop there. But one point is, first, we need to broaden the scope and understand philanthropy at all levels of society: community philanthropy, middle class giving, high net worth individuals, corporate, and so on and so forth, and try to embrace the whole diversity of the sector, because it's also where the biggest potential is in terms of dollars too. Although it's more complex to harness, because of course it's a variety of sources, and it's more complicated to discuss with 1 million individual donors than with one big donor. But there are ways that we can work around that. So that's one. Second is to transform these philanthropy support organizations, these networks, into accelerators for the adoption of the SDG framework, for the communication around that, and to start creating spaces for collaboration with other actors using the existing networks and organizations, in addition to the new and specific SDG platform that we hope to continue supporting in the future, and how we can sort of multiply that function and that effect. Three, it's the question of this enabling environment for philanthropy. And I'd like to remind all of us here in this room that I think the philanthropic sector is probably the only sector in the world, the only industry in the world that doesn't have a global advocacy body. And I think we should wonder why, and we should do something about it. So I think that the SDG Philanthropy Platform and Wings, we can start building that collective voice and sort of build the collective voice, because we need to work with our colleagues from Civicus, from Forest, from other global civil society networks to make the case for an enabling environment for the field. Locally, but also globally, there is space for influence and for action. So that's a third element. And finally, because of course, if we, as you were saying, if we don't address these legal barriers and other policy barriers, we can do everything we want to increase and improve the sector. We will not be able to make it happen or to sustain it. And finally, the question of policy, and I think that we were talking about dollars a lot, which is important, but I think that foundations also, and not just foundations, but the philanthropic sector has other assets in terms of influence, in terms of networking, in terms of expertise, in terms of connection with the private sector and other aspects. And so the question is how we can give more strength to the policy initiatives of philanthropic actors on specific SDG issues, such as climate, such as gender, and other important questions. So when there is a small group of foundations like the F20 working on climate, for instance, how can we help with the platform, with Wings, to connect these to other networks and to give more strength to these collective policy initiatives, again, to unlock this contribution of the sector. So we really count on your support in this new phase. As Marco said, it's an open platform, so we hope you can all bring your ideas also to help us design it, and then take part in it and make it happen really. Because our hope is that in 2030, we're good? Okay, switching. Right, so in 2030, that we can look behind and say, yes, we really did everything that we could to unlock the potential of our sector for the SDGs. So before leaving the floor, I would like to express our deep gratitude to UNDP and RPA for their trust, for their leadership, We are very honored, of course, by the invitation to take on the leadership of the platform, the co-leadership of the platform, and really excited to walk in your footsteps and hopefully continue increasing the impact of this important initiative. So I think we should also have a round of applauses for RPA, for Heather Grady in particular, and for Kelly Deggins and her team for everything they did. They've really been instrumental in setting up the platform, nurturing it, and achieving so much during the first phase. So thank you for that. And so we look forward to collaborating with UNDP, with the Foundation Center, and all the platforms, all the partners of the platform, and all of you. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Benjamin. Thank you. Around and highlighting the need for new and deeper forms of partnership in this work. It's not okay to collaborate in the way that we have been up until now. We really need to think and work differently. I'd like to invite our panelists to come up to the front and take your seats now, please. And as Benjamin said, we're really very lucky to have a diverse and very interesting panel for you today. Please, yeah. Great. So we have Susanti Satoris with the Indonesia Philanthropy Association. We have Natasha Matic with the King Khalid Foundation. We have Michael Mapstone with Charities Aid Foundation. We have Gloria Cid Gerlach from Caixa Banking Foundation, and Ricardo Enriquez from Instituto Unibanco. Thanks for joining us today. Our first question goes to Gloria from Caixa. So as someone representing the Caixa Banking Foundation, could you please share your vision, your organization's vision on philanthropy's contribution to the SDGs? And particularly some of the approaches that Caixa is taking, moving it forward, and maybe some of the challenges that you're facing as well.
Thank you, Matt, and happy to be here, happy to be in this conversation, and that La Caixa Foundation is part of that, and happy and thank you for all of you for being here. I think that all of us will agree that philanthropy has a key role in achieving the agenda, the 2030 agenda, because philanthropy and foundations, as La Caixa Foundation, our work is aligned with the SDGs I think in 100% of our work is aligned, and was aligned before the SDGs existed. And we have very important points that allows us to work for this commitment and for this achievement. One of those points is that we are our role is key on being a bridge between the public and the private sector. As a foundations, we have a role there, and in our case, La Caixa is always trying to be there, no, as a bridge. Through governments, through NGOs, through all the stakeholders that we work with. Second point that I think it's a strong point for foundations and for philanthropy in general is that we have the capacity to be innovative, to take risk, as was said before, and to try to work in a new ways to be more effective. As well, we work, or La Caixa Foundation works always through partnerships, through collaborations with governments in a national level, regional level, with NGOs. We work almost with 90% of the NGOs in Spain. This is key because everyone can bring their knowledge to share a mission, and to share not only a mission or objectives, to share methodologies and to try to work together. And as a foundations, or in our case, we run our own projects, and we are on the ground. We know what the people need. And this is essential, to listen to the people that need us the most vulnerable people that we are working for. For us is key to know what we have to do. First, listen, and then decide which kind of work we want to do. No? La Caixa, I don't know if you know La Caixa Foundation in general. Do you know La Caixa? Very briefly, it's a Spanish foundation, the first foundation in Spain, the second one in Europe. And Natalie Ross told me yesterday that we are the fourth one in the world. I had to come to New York to be aware of that. La Caixa Foundation works in different areas: the social, the cultural, the scientific and research, and the educational area. We work mostly in Spain. Nowadays, we work as well in Portugal, but we have an international area as well. Our budget for 2019 is of 545 million euros. We run 50,000 activities per year with more or less 11 million people that are our beneficiaries. This is very briefly figures about La Caixa. And we started to think that we had to engage to the SDGs in 2015. And the first thing we did as a foundation was to match the SDGs with the programs we were doing. And in fact, we are almost working for all the 17 SDGs. Secondly, we try to understand and to use the language of the SDGs and to share this language with our stakeholders. As I said, 90% of NGOs in Spain, and with, of course, internally as well and externally with our stakeholders, and in general to gain visibility through this umbrella of the SDGs. We have collaborated a lot with the SDGs Action Campaign in Bonn. This year we were part of the jury in the SDGs Action Campaign Awards. We ran an exhibition about the SDGs in Spain, which visited 8 different cities to spread the knowledge of the SDGs through the people, because finally, I don't know if everyone, I guess in New York, everyone knows about the SDGs, but I don't know if in every country the people knows about the SDGs. In Spain, I can tell you that people doesn't know a lot of that. And the first thing we have to do is to, as a foundation, is to share this language with the people, with our beneficiaries, and of course with our stakeholders. And of course, we want as well to incorporate this language to our partnerships. In 2 cases, our child nutrition program in collaboration with UNHCR and our child vaccination program in alliance with Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, were awarded with Go SDGs awards promoted by the Spanish branch of UN Global Compact. We are collaborating with Impact 2030 as well to spread the SDGs through our 10,000 volunteers that we have in Spain. And of course, we are at this point to try to incorporate the message and to share it in everything that we are doing. But we have challenges as well, as you asked me for our challenges. The first thing we did was to share this language with the staff of the foundation. We are 450 people working on the foundation, and we share this common language with the staff, but you have to share it as well with the board. And not always it's so easy to get the board involved in this kind of conversations. And of course with your stakeholders. Have we done with that? Not yet. And the second challenge that we are facing is that we are convinced that every partnership that we have is aligned with the SDGs. Are we incorporating this as a mission, as a goal in the partnership? Not always. Depends on the program, on the staff that is running this program or this project. And finally, do we measure, do we have data, do we evaluate the things we do? Of course we are doing that. Of course it's one of the main points of our strategic plan as a foundation. But these figures, are we telling us how our work is aligned with the SDGs? Not yet. This is one of the things that we have to do as well. There is a lot of work to do, and as was said, we have 10 years ahead. It's not too much, but as a foundation, or La Caixa Foundation is keen to continuing with our commitment with the SDGs.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Gloria. Particularly interesting to hear about some of the work you're doing around socializing the SDGs, but also really thank you for being willing to share some of the challenges that you're facing as well. I'd like to turn next to Michael. Michael, many of us know CAF as a champion of better giving, helping donors and other actors be more strategic in achieving impact. Would like you to please talk just a little bit about some of the bridges and barriers you see for philanthropy's engagement with other actors.
Sure. Thanks, Matt, and thanks to everybody involved in this really important discussion. I'm going to start with the barriers, and I'm going to apologise in advance because I may upset some people, especially given some of the earlier opening remarks. So many apologies. We find at CAF globally, one of the main barriers is actually language, completely. I was at an event yesterday with a few others here where there was round agreement that the SDGs are in fact the language of New York. They have, in reality, unfortunately, marginal relevance to philanthropy globally, and certainly almost no relevance to communities globally. So that's the reality that we're in. We often like to pretend philanthropy is strategic, but the reality is philanthropy is pretty messy and mostly driven by emotional responses and personal experiences. Look at the data. I think that, and it's ropey, it's sketchy, it's pretty rubbish, to be honest with you, unfortunately. But the data tells the story. Global philanthropy is probably worth around 600 billion a year in donations and grants. Less than 10% of that is officially directed to SDGs. And 30% of that 10% is actually from one foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So the data is clearly telling us we've got something to work on around the SDG language. And if you actually look at some of the data, it gets a little bit worrying, where you have US foundation grants to the SDGs is actually going down. It's going up in Europe, and it's certainly going up across the emerging markets, which is incredibly interesting. But we have a challenge, one of language. And that challenge is those living in the world of the SDGs, everybody in this room and most people in New York this week, want to leverage philanthropic funds and convert philanthropy and philanthropists to the church of the SDGs. I'd argue we might be wasting our time and effort and money on that. Maybe we should do things behind the scenes. Philanthropy already does a huge amount of work of social good. And with 244 indicators for the SDGs, surely it's safe to assume that there's quite a lot of crossover happening already. Perhaps we should actually be investing more in the data capture to better understand what philanthropy is and isn't investing in, and working behind the scenes to link these initiatives to existing to the SDGs, and moulding what is already happening to the language of the SDGs. You don't need philanthropy to do it directly. Others can do it for us. What we do need to do is analyse that data to find out what philanthropy is doing, what is good, what can be grown, what can be leveraged, what can be scaled, and importantly, what are the gaps and how do we address those. For those that are aligned, the handful, and engaged, we unfortunately, I think, have in government and multilateral agencies and others a capacity challenge. The understanding of and the ability to collaborate with philanthropy, I think, from what we hear from our stakeholders, is that that capacity is quite low. Investment is certainly required, I think, in government and agencies' capability to partner with purpose and to fully understand where philanthropy is coming from. Not to raise funds, but to truly collaborate and co-create with philanthropy to design programs from the beginning, not to expect funding automatically to go into existing programs. And there also needs to be a really strong understanding that philanthropy isn't just about money and additional financial resources. It's new ideas, it's new approaches, it's different perspectives, and sometimes quite different objectives, to be honest. And this is especially relevant when we're talking about philanthropy and the growing philanthropy in the global south and in emerging markets, where it certainly isn't business as usual in terms of business, government, and philanthropy. Moving on from some of the philanthropy bashing, there are also a few technical issues around the enabling environment, which was spoken about a bit earlier. FATF, anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing regulation, make it near enough impossible for philanthropy to engage directly with the global south, and certainly make it near impossible for civil society to operate. There is also a limiting potential, limiting policy environment in most emerging markets that restricts the potential of the growth of philanthropy. I'm talking tax incentives, I'm talking motivation to get the emerging wealth in emerging markets to donate. This is frankly suboptimizing an opportunity to tap into huge wealth and leverage its impact and its ideas, and importantly, that stakeholder collaboration. So whilst governments and agencies, I think, can address some of these issues internally, much of this capacity actually sits outside the donors, the governments, and the philanthropic institutions' operations. It requires a strong and healthy philanthropy infrastructure to build those bridges, especially in the global south, as Benjamin was talking about earlier. There's a real lack of philanthropy infrastructure there. Now, this infrastructure is really, really important. It is the bridge that translates different languages. It captures and analyzes that data independently. It identifies opportunities and what the gaps are, brings different stakeholders together, and advocates for a more effective enabling environment, and also works really hard to grow effective philanthropy. This infrastructure, this philanthropy infrastructure, is often quite invisible and often really intangible. But it is really needed if we want to realise what the global goals look like. So to the bridges, I can talk about what I think this philanthropy infrastructure really looks like, and I've got 3 examples. So one example, I think, is the Global Innovative Finance Unit at the International Federation of the Red Crescent Societies. Now, first of all, this unit has not only, amazingly, brought together a different number of their own national societies, which is a huge task in of itself, but has brought also together the Islamic Development Bank, HSBC, and the law firm White & Case to create a blended investment company by merging a standard investment fund and an Islamic bond, or a sukuk, all to raise around $100 million to reduce cholera deaths by 90% within 10 years across a range of Islamic countries. This is basically creating something really innovative out of relatively traditional models and ways of working, but by looking at it differently. It's worked across sectors, it's understanding different cultures, and it's seen an opportunity. It's quite amazing, so you should look it up. Or it's a bit of a pitch for CAF here, or it's CAF America, working with USAID and Chevron and Bangladeshi civil society to create a diaspora fund, tapping into the Bangladeshi diaspora across the US to channel funds directly to the global south in a safe and viable way. Or it's one of our partners, Aegis in Brazil, which has worked across civil society, government and philanthropic institutions to bring changes to the Brazilian endowment law, which could release around 1 billion more philanthropic funds into social causes over the next 5 to 10 years. Now, these examples and many others, I think, require third parties who are able to work across sectors independently, really grounded in their local context. They approach problems with impact and solution-focused mindsets. They enable innovation, and they find new solutions for development. So I think we really need to look at how we invest in this infrastructure if we want to achieve the global goals. And also, I think, lastly, I think we really do need to recognise that actually most philanthropy isn't big institutions. It's not major donors and high net worth individuals. It is everyday people. And we've seen huge economic growth over the past 10 years, which will, by 2030, see about 2.4 billion people across the world join the global middle classes, and their spending power is going to double from about 30 trillion to 60 trillion in the next 10 years. Now, if you're able to tap into that and get those 2.4 billion people donating to the same level of the UK in terms of their spending power, which is only 0.5% in donations. It's 1.5% in the US and 1.2% in Pakistan, so we're going conservative here. You would release around $320 billion of real free money every year into social causes, probably where it's most needed, which is in the global south. So I think these are some of the big numbers and the ways that I think we need to build bridges, which is but to build the bridge builders. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Really appreciated the highlighting that there are opportunities out there, and particularly, I think we agree that in our work around the world with AKF, we see the power of community members becoming philanthropists within their communities, and so much more than it just being about resources. It's about the social capital. It's about what working together can do. The third question today will be asked to the three representatives that we've invited who've come to us from different geographic regions. So we have Natasha Matic from the King Khalid Foundation. We have Susanti Satoris from the Indonesia Philanthropy Association, and Ricardo Enriquez from Instituto Unibanco. And to all three of you, I'm going to ask, we're really excited to hear about some of the experience that you see on the ground in the regions that you're working. And so we'd like you to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and also the opportunities that you're seeing. But in particular, to focus a little bit on some of the enablers, some of the platforms, tools, resources, legal provisions that are needed to inspire more collaboration for change at scale. And I'm going to start by asking Natasha.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited that we have representatives from various countries here, because I think I echo what Michael has said. What's happening here in New York, in the US, and in Europe is quite different to what's happening in the rest of the world. And specifically, I can talk about the Middle East because my foundation is based in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So just to give you a little bit of an overall general view on what's going on there, I think I would like to repeat what Marcos has said. We have a problem. Saudi Arabia is one of the, and let me focus on the positives first, and then I'll tell you all the negatives. Saudi Arabia is one of the first countries that voluntarily committed to report on the SDGs to the UN. And we actually reported for the first time last year, and our foundation was there on behalf of the civil society in Saudi, reporting together with the business community, and so that's a good thing. Saudi has also created a secretariat for SDGs on the level of one of the ministries. It's within the Ministry of Economy and Planning, which is one of the strongest ministries in the country. So very good thing as well. There is an effort to align the Saudi Vision 2030 with SDGs, and also some of the strategic plans for different ministries that are working in different aspects. There are plans to do a campaign to promote SDGs to the wider audiences, and whether it's business community, nonprofit sector, foundations, and others. And there is a plan to develop a platform that will try and capture some of these things. So those are all positive. However, these are plans. How long? We have, 14 months? These are plans, great plans. We have we're first to report and everything, but there's really nothing that's gone above and beyond that. We at our foundation have done quite a lot, and we've been a pioneer pretty much, and the first ones to talk about SDGs in the country when they first came around. We aligned all of our strategy, our programs, our grantees as well. But I can tell you that 95% of the country has never heard of SDGs. I can tell you that 95% of nonprofit sector has never heard of SDGs in the country. So that's a huge problem. We can sit here and say we need to, in 14 months create all of these things and put the money, but when most of the rest of the world doesn't even know what SDGs are, what are we really talking about here? These are not, I can list all kinds of challenges, which is lack of awareness of the wider, broader community in Saudi about SDGs, lack of alignment of anyone's programs with SDGs, lack of measurement tools. Nobody's measuring anything. If they don't know about SDGs, they can't measure. There is no way to measure. If the government is not encouraging and promoting SDGs, how are people supposed to respond to that, and where do they go to respond to that? And also, there are a lot of efforts happening. I mean, there are a lot of organizations there working on fighting poverty, health, education, and they are actually contributing to SDGs, but none of that is being captured because there are no tools and resources and platforms. And the platform that Heather and the team here has created is fantastic. People just don't know about it in the rest of the world. So those are some of the major challenges that we are facing. Benjamin mentioned that 60% of the foundations in the world don't collaborate. It's 99% in the Middle East. They don't collaborate. Everyone is in their own little silo. Nobody has even talked about systems change. It's project-based approach to fixing problems. Systems change is not even in the vocabulary of the foundations in the Middle East, specifically in the Gulf. And there's a lot of money there. You're talking about channeling a lot of that money to fight climate change or SDGs. Marcos, I call you to change some of the FATF, regulations that are related to transferring money. Nobody from Saudi Arabia can transfer money anywhere. No foundation, no nonprofit organization. There is absolutely, and I'm sure it's the same as Kuwait, my colleague there from Kuwait. It's how are we supposed to?
That's the one you wanted to do?
Yes, please do that one first. I mean, it's. Huge problem. We wrote at KKF, we wrote the whole report about the financial restrictions and the nonprofit sector. We consider nonprofit sector a vulnerable group because of it. We have no access to be able to transfer money and receive money. There's nobody in the Gulf is able to, no nonprofit in the Gulf is able to receive money from foreign organizations, foreign donors. That's a problem, or fund anything outside of these countries. So, and there is, as I said, I mean, these are the richest countries in the world. If they can't fund outside, then what are we talking about here? So I think what's needed is everything. What's needed is awareness. What's needed is regulation, easing of regulations, financial regulations. What's needed is raising awareness about this platform and being able to teach people how to use the platform, how to report, how to measure. Measurement tools are needed. Workshops, pretty much everything is needed. So I'm sorry to be a little bit negative here, but I think we have to be realistic at what's possible and where we're at this point in the rest of the world, and not in the New York bubble here, which is great, but doesn't really do much for the rest.
You make me look good. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to really understand what's going on, within Saudi, which is obviously a long way from here in New York. So I'd like to pose the same question, please, to Susanti.
Thank you, Matt. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much for having me. I was here in this building in 2015 on SDG Philanthropy platform, representing the association. Indonesia is one of the focus country of the platform, and we are the kind of focal point for the platform in Indonesia. So I'm happy to share the progress that we made, and also later, of course, the challenges. So in Indonesia, the government already created a structure for the SDG implementation, national implementation. It is led by the National Development Planning Ministry. In 2016, so the structure was created, and a year later, the National Action Plan for SDG implementation was issued. And from the beginning, the association, we understand our role as accelerator, as Benjamin said, accelerator for the SDGs, and we embrace SDG as the common framework that we promote to our members, and also philanthropy institutions who are not our members. And so we work closely with the government. We are part of one of the clusters created by the government to as communication forum as a forum to facilitate communication between the government and the key stakeholders. So we are in the same cluster with the business, so philanthropy and business communication forum. And so the National Action Plan recognized the potential role of philanthropy, and that's partly thanks to our work with the government. And it's not automatic, to that we have the National Action Plan that it will be implemented by all stakeholders, including the local government. So we have organized many activities, workshops, trainings, events to socialize SDGs. We created a guideline for our members. There are many misunderstandings, including some philanthropy organizations think that we have to implement all the goals. Yeah, so in the guidelines we promoting alignment. So it doesn't mean that philanthropic institutions have to change their work. It's just that they need to align more with the goals and the indicators. And so we also understand that the philanthropy actors is not only family and corporate foundations. In socializing and engaging philanthropy actors to support the implementation, the achievement of SDGs in Indonesia, we look at specific groups and sectors that we think have a very high potential to accelerate the implementation. So one is the Islamic almsgiving. So Indonesia has the biggest is the country with the biggest Muslim populations, more than 200 Muslims in Indonesia, and the potential of almsgiving. The data varies, but so around. Some figures says it's 60 billion per year, and there are more. That's the moderate estimate, but some figures also says it's around 20 to 30 billion US dollars per year. So that is huge. Almsgiving have been managed by the government-owned agencies and non-government. And many more almsgiving are channeled through informal mechanisms, this is we see this very strategic opportunity to align the Islamic almsgiving with SDGs, but we need theological justification. So the association works with Basnas. Basnas, that's the national government body to manage Islamic almsgiving. And then a year after many discussions, so Basnas issued fiqh, so that's kind of legal basis for to channel the money for SDGs. It is now the guidance for all government agencies managing the arms. But the non-government ones, they are also using it as guidance. But there's still a challenge because we still need a fatwa from the Ulama Council. One of the challenge is that because SDGs is all inclusive, so there are still some doubts from the non-government alms giving bodies whether the money from the Muslims can be given to the non-Muslim communities. So we still need this theological justification. And the other group that we think very critical to accelerate implementation of SDGs is the youth, millennials. So we have many activities with them. So we have festival every 2 years. We organize festivals, and the last 2 events, the festivals 2016, 2018, the focus is always on SDGs. So we not only we have sessions, seminars, but also competitions, digital storytelling, board game design competitions, all kinds of activities that can attract the interest of a younger generation. So it's and one small things that we did during the festival, we asked all the participants to identify the goals they are working on in their booth. So in 2016, maybe only half of the participants could identify, but in 2018, everyone have put up the 2 or 3 goals that they were coming. So that's just small indications, how they have incorporated SDGs into their work. In Indonesia, if I can reflect on what Natasha just alluded to, I think I hardly hear resistance to SDGs. Yeah. Unlike global climate goals. Yeah, there are some camps who resist climate goals, but SDGs very friendly and inclusive, overarching. So I see corporations, not only philanthropists, but corporations, CSOs, the governments, they all embrace SDGs. But of course, it doesn't mean that there's a speed implementation. So we, to accelerate, from the philanthropy side, we help establish philanthropy clusters. So far we have 6 philanthropy clusters that work on the goals aligned with SDGs. One is health, food nutrition, arts and culture, environment and conservation, and habitat, housing. And so the challenges, if I may share, is first is there's still misunderstanding. As I said, that many philanthropy organizations think that there's a practical, misunderstanding, but also there's very, very few still things that, this is another international agenda that, they feel that they are forced to align with. I think one of the biggest challenge is related to what Michael said, data. Mm-hmm. We are one of the few philanthropy support organizations. And there is no special organization that takes care of data. If you ask me, what is the potential of philanthropy in Indonesia in terms of the amount of giving, I don't know. We don't have CAF in Indonesia, so nobody trace, in terms of the amount of giving. And even though how many philanthropic organizations, it's just very hard. And we are the only association philanthropy association in Indonesia, and the work is everything. The same in research also, we have to do everything. In the workshop organized, we are a member of Wings, and the workshop organized by Wings a few months ago. We are philanthropy support organizations. We are busy providing support to people, but nobody provides support to us. No, there are few, but it's just too small. Too few organizations provide support to us. We also need capacity, building. So, and the last one is I'd like to touch on what Marcus said earlier about so philanthropy is not only about giving, but how to influence the board, the trustees, so to align with SDGs. As you know, in Indonesia, business are dominated by family business, and many of them, gain their wealth through in the sectors that are not too friendly to climate. And so expecting them to divest, for instance, from fossil based industries, that seems still very challenging for us. We are currently starting to engage high net worth individuals, whether they are our members or not. So we have collaborations with the US and European global philanthropists. So we facilitate exchange between high net worth individuals in Indonesia and the US, and so that we see that's as interim way to influence their business decision making through philanthropic avenues.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Santi.
you.
Really appreciate the perspective from Indonesia, and now I'd like to pass over to Ricardo, who's going to talk a little bit about his experience in Brazil.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone. It's quite difficult to say something interesting after 6-7 speech, so I try to react to some provocative notes of Mark's. But just before that, I am at a private foundation at one of the 3 that we have at the biggest private bank in Brazil, actually in Latin America. Itaú Unibanco is the biggest one in Latin America. We have these 3 private institutions, these 3 foundations. We deal majorly with education, public-private partnership in education. After we can discuss, we have a canonic strategic of evaluation, and we do have results, really relevant impact on learnership and reduction of dropouts, and we do actually nowadays with 20% of the public enrollment of secondary education in Brazil. So it's huge, it has impact, it's relevant, and we can demonstrate that. But, so we can discuss this after. But besides that, and I changed everything that I've intended to talk, so that's I think we have some evidence that the difficulties that Marcus is bringing are bigger than we have already shown. So one is the classic discussion, and how can we be the private foundations innovative, try to open new fields, and at the same time be relevant in large scale. So there is an inner contradiction on that, and more than this, our experience is that we need long-term relationship with governments to arrive anywhere. Obviously, to arrive at some good place. And more than that, I don't know anywhere, but in Brazil, the majority of governments look at us as funders, but not funders in the sense that Marcus was bringing. Funders to do the programs that governments have already decided to implement. So since we do not have any evidence that if they were good, no problem at all, but an evidence, concrete evidence that those programs work, and the expectation is, besides all other evidence that we have, is that we give money to put this, to change that mindset. We need to build a long-term relationship based on trust, and a word that everybody says, but it's really difficult to practice, with co-creative initiative governance. Because if you believe that we are in a democracy, that's not so easy to say in Brazil, but if we're trying to do this, is democratic governance that are elected. Good politicians need to be authors of the politics. If they do not are authors on that, it's almost impossible to make really concrete change. So one of our major challenges in Brazil, we have more than 100 private foundations, and the one that I run, I can talk about that, is how to make a step-by-step relationship that build trusts and create capacity of innovation. That's not easy at all. One of our major programs that have those impacts that I just mentioned to you, it's a long-term partnership. We have our secondary education is at the state level. We have 27 states in our federation. And we have large-scale partnership with 6 of those states. And we have some states that we have more than 5 years of partnership. We are starting the 6 years now, 6 years. And only after 2-3 years, we really have capacity of build this confidence, of build this trust that, after all, impacts on that. So the ways to mobilize resource, the ways to make a platform, to make it concrete, needs to build trust environments for something that a priori we do not believe on environments. Besides that, we do not practice collaboration. So ourselves, we do not have any concrete reputation on collaboration to show the governments that it's feasible to make this collaboration. So I'm just saying that we have a contradiction at the first beginning of the idea of producing this platform. So we should discuss a little bit more on how to do this. Just to end on that, more than this, 2 things. We do not have, until now, good tools and good instruments to make this, obviously, this SDGs is a set of guidelines that can produce a common language, a good common language. But at least in Brazil, besides not everybody knows the SDGs, but we do not have some set of measurements and set of tools that governments and foundations really deal with it in a friendly way to actually measure the probable impacts on the SDGs. And finally, when we talk about the boards of our foundations, and try to be a little less idiosyncratic, as you said, no, but the desire of member of the board, the desire of the enterprise, everything like that. We need to show concrete strategies, concrete impact interventions, and not only a set of good practice. Because the list of good practice, they do not show at all if they arrive to make large-scale impact. Usually they show pilot impacts, and we cannot change this mindset of the board without showing the possibility of large-scale impact. So there is another domain, how to mobilize the resource at large-scale probabilities if there is a pressure for idiosyncratic strategies from the firm, and at the same time we do not arrive to show effective impact at large scale. So just to react to your provocative words.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ricardo. Let's put our hands together for the panelists, their insights and their experiences. As Ricardo said at the end there, this is something we really urgently need to talk about. And we wanted to use the remainder of our time here today to speak together in an interactive session about some of these bridges, some of these barriers, some of these enablers, and some examples, the concrete examples that we're seeing. And so what's going to happen is each table is going to have a question, and we're going to have clusters of tables. Some are going to be looking at bridges, some at barriers, some at enablers, and some at examples. And we'd like you just to talk with the people that you find yourself with on your table about those bridges, about those barriers, enablers, and examples that you've seen.
That's right.
And you're also going to have some colored Post-it notes and some markers. And if you can take a note of some of the ideas that are percolating up from your group. So one idea per Post-it note, and choose someone who can write clearly, because we are going to try and capture all of this and share it back with the participants. So about 12 minutes in your tables to discuss the question that if it's not there already, it will be appearing momentarily at your table. Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much for engaging and for helping us with this discussion. It's good to see some of the ideas coming up from within the groups, and we're committing to capture all of these ideas and share them with you.
Okay.
What we'd like to do is, hi. We could have scheduled this for a half day, couldn't we? Hello. Thank you. Oh, reminds me, I was at my brother's wedding a couple of weeks ago. It reminds me of that. Wonderful. So what I'd like to do is just hear one person from each cluster. Unfortunately, we don't have time for each table, but I'd like to get one highlight from each cluster of tables. So these three tables, we're thinking about some of the barriers. And would anyone like to share with me a highlight that came out of your conversation, or share with the group? Get one. Anyone?
Yes.
Oh, there we are.
Great. So very briefly, I think the question around just one of our colleagues brought up the question of human nature, that we think our programs are more special than others. And so how could our special program get potentially lost in the ambiguities of the perhaps SDG agenda? So how do we maintain our specialness while also aligning with the ambiguity of the global agenda?
Yeah, so that tension between partnering and maybe getting lost in our idea that we really, really care about. Thanks so much. So this cluster, we're looking at the bridges. So one person who'd like to share something that came up in your conversation around the bridges.
Hi, my name is Asha Jadeja from Motwani Foundation. We're a family foundation based in the Bay Area, San Francisco. And well, one of the ideas that came up was that if sort of mundane tasks that are used, that operate governments right now, just like in Estonia, if we could take some of these online, would it make it possible for us to have multiple stakeholders then have transparent and a sort of accountable, idea of what's happening on government spending, and make the processes more streamlined for all stakeholders to participate, so that it's crystal clear who's getting the benefits and who's not.
Right.
And so I think blockchain could be an incredibly important tool for that. And I think Estonia has already shown us that beautiful model. So in some smaller, step one kind of a thing, can we do this? That's one of the questions, one of the ideas that came up.
So data is such a barrier to participation, and we want to enable much broader participation. Thank you so much. All right, so the next group, we're looking at the enablers. Oh, sorry. Yes, we can. We've got time for another one.
Okay, really quick.
Sorry.
I started a platform called Aim to Flourish back in 2016, and we use the SDGs to teach them to business school students all over the world. And the students have to go out and find a company that is for-profit, scalable, doing something to achieve one or more of the global goals. We now have more than 2,100 stories on our platform about scalable businesses in more than 80 countries, and we give out 17 Flourish Prizes each year, one for each of the global goals. And the students, these are the next business leaders who are learning about what they can do to help achieve a world where we leave no one behind.
Thank you so much. Great. And actually, I think it's the examples groups right here. Is that correct? Yes, not the enablers. Great. So love to hear from someone.
Yes, okay. Well, we were asked to consider what are the best examples. Sorry? Stand up, me?
Yeah.
Okay, we were asked to come up with the best examples we found of multi-stakeholder cooperation in the context of the SDGs, and we came up with various ideas, but the one that we're picking out, it's not hugely original, I have to say, but we think it is a very, very effective example, and that is the Gavi Alliance, because it's a combination of public and private sectors, and as you know, working to provide vaccines to children in developing countries, but it works very, very well. It's a proven vehicle over the last, how long is it in existence? About maybe 10, 15 years? Yeah. So not hugely original, but we think that that's a good example.
Right. Yes. So there are some fantastic examples, both at the global level in the case of Gavi, and also I think we heard at the country level of some examples and some bright spots that we can look to and build upon. So over on this side, I think we were looking at some of the most important enablers for this work. And
yes, Dumisa from Botswana. So I think we just sort of agreed that there was a need for some form of convening, whether it's through an association or biannual meetings that can be online or in person as well, where it would be very critical, having different stakeholders and then at least being able to sort of discuss particularly around issues of language. And I think what we said is that, not one would be the solution to all, but that just having a multi-pronged approach to it. Yeah. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So thank you for coming and thank you for contributing to this. This is all, I think, really helpful information and ideas for Benjamin and for the Wings team, and indeed for all of us as we look to engage in really concrete action and doing something differently. It's not going to be okay. Just continue the same way that we have been in the past. I'm going to hand over in just a moment to Heather, who's going to share some final words with us. But before I do that, we have one piece of housekeeping, which is that for those of you that have these wonderful plastic name tag holders, the Ford Foundation does recycle those. So please leave them on your way out, and they can be used again. Wonderful. Heather, please. Thank you.
So I'm going to cede my last few minutes to our president and CEO, Melissa Berman. She does not encourage mission creep at Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. Our mission is to promote more thoughtful, effective philanthropy, but she does encourage a lot of innovation within that mission. And I thank her for allowing the platform to be a part of that. And she's been analyzing philanthropy for 2 decades, and I'm sure you have some interesting ideas.
Thank you, Heather. That's very kind of you. I want to thank all of you for your enthusiasm and participation. I want to echo the expression of gratitude to Heather Grady, Kelly Diggins, and also our colleague Carolyn Swozy for everything that they've done to make today another successful milestone in our work on the SDG Philanthropy Platform. I'd also like to express our appreciation to all of the partners that we've been working with over the last 5 years, whether it's Hilton, the Ford Foundation, the Brock Family Foundation, as well as Aga Khan and all the other organizations that you see on the program today. It's really been wonderful. And third, I'd like to say how excited we are to pass this on to Wings as the global platform leader going forward. We think it's an ideal choice and an ideal partnership, and we really are delighted that they are taking this on and moving it forward. And then I think I would also like to say that I'm optimistic. Because I feel that it's terrible, close to 5 p.m. in New York to leave a room not optimistic. So, one of the things that's already been mentioned is the extremely impressive young woman Greta Thunberg and her inspirational speech, right? So, and my own tiny random connection is that yesterday evening, a millennial who I happen to know extremely well saw her on the New York City subway and said that this was the best celebrity sighting ever. And I think that compared to, you know, other kinds of celebrity sightings that we have here in New York City, like Beyonce, that is a vote of confidence in the future that we can all be excited about. How many millennials are here in the room? She also referenced the lyrics relating to DNA of Lizzo's most recent big hit, which I cannot repeat in public because I'm not a millennial. So, one of the things I wanted to say is there is obviously a lot of work to be done to build awareness and to build progress. We have tried to issue our own couple of guides about philanthropy and the SDGs to translate some of these concepts from the professional world to the world of private donors. But I think that we have to bear something in mind. It may be true that 98.9% of the people in the world don't know what the SDGs are. They don't know what the Gini coefficient is either, but they know that income inequality is a problem and they know what the trends are, right? They may not know what systems change really entails. They may never have seen a theory of change model, but they know what inequality is and they know that things are wrong and they know that they will do something about it, right? They know that their work, their spending, the way they live their life, the businesses that they work for, the products that they choose are all tied together, not in separate buckets, and that they're all important in that they need to all make the world a better place. So really, it's not their job to know our terminology. It's our job to help them achieve what they can do. So thank you.